What you're about to see isn't a forgotten event. It was everyday life, a Canada that existed in plain sight until the world changed around it. To understand daily life in 1960s Canada, we'll follow an ordinary family through a single day, from sunrise to night, and rediscover the routines, sights, and feelings that defined a vanished era. But first, we need to understand the rhythm that shaped these mornings. Morning light filters through lace curtains in a modest bungalow on the outskirts of Toronto. The year is 1965. In the kitchen, a percolator bubbles on the stove, filling the air with the rich aroma of coffee. A woman in a cotton house dress sets the breakfast table. White bread for toast, butter in a glass dish, marmalade in a jar with yesterday's date still penciled on the lid. Outside, the milkman's truck hums quietly down the street, glass bottles clinking in their metal carrier as he makes his morning rounds. Glass bottles sit on doorsteps, empty ones with coins tucked inside for tomorrow's delivery. No one thinks twice about leaving money outside overnight. This is how the day begins for millions of Canadians in the 1960s, not with the jarring buzz of an alarm clock on a smartphone, but with the gentle sounds of a world that moves at a different tempo, a world where routines are rituals, where neighborhoods are woven together by daily interactions that require no passwords, no apps, no screens. The air smells different here. Bread baking in home ovens, coffee percolating on stovetops, the faint trace of coal smoke from a neighbor's furnace mixing with the morning dew. To understand what has been lost, we must step back inside that vanished decade. We must move through the hours as they once unfolded, from the first light of dawn to the glow of the television set in a darkened living room late at night. Because the 1960s in Canada were not simply another era. They were the last years of a certain way of being, a way of living that would soon dissolve like morning mist under a rising sun. The rhythms were slower, the connections were deeper, and the future, for those who lived it, seemed to promise only good things. Children wake to the smell of breakfast cooking downstairs. Bacon sizzles in a cast-iron pan. Eggs are cracked one by one into hot butter. There are no microwaves, no frozen breakfast sandwiches wrapped in plastic. Everything is made from scratch, prepared by hands that have done this same work for years. The mother moves through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, setting out plates, pouring juice from a glass pitcher, buttering toast while it's still hot. The father sits at the table reading the morning newspaper, the pages crisp and ink fresh. He wears a shirt and tie even though his shift at the factory doesn't start for another hour. There is a formality to the morning, a sense of order that extends from the way the table is set to the way children are expected to sit up straight and finish what's on their plates. Breakfast is not rushed. It is a gathering, a moment of togetherness before the family scatters to their separate worlds. At 8:30, children leave for school. They walk. Some are as young as 5 or 6, but they walk alone or in small groups, traversing streets and crossing intersections without a parent in sight. There are no car lineups outside the school, no traffic jams of worried mothers idling in SUVs. The children simply go. They know the route. They know which neighbors will wave from their porches, which dogs will bark as they pass, which corner store might have penny candy if they have a nickel in their pocket. The school is 10 blocks away, sometimes more, but distance is irrelevant. This is what children do. They walk to school, and nobody worries. Inside the classroom, the day begins with routine. The teacher stands at the front, and the students rise for the national anthem. A portrait of Queen Elizabeth hangs on the wall beside the blackboard. The schoolroom smells of chalk dust and floor wax. Desks are arranged in neat rows, wooden and worn smooth by years of use. The school nurse makes her rounds on Tuesdays. The dentist comes once a term, examining rows of children in the gymnasium, one after another. It is all part of the structure, the invisible scaffolding that holds the day together. While children sit in classrooms, their fathers are at work. In 1966, a man could support his entire family on a single income, not just barely, comfortably. A brand new 3-bedroom bungalow in Ottawa cost $17,000. A young father's yearly salary. The mathematics of survival were different then. One paycheck could cover a mortgage, a car, groceries, clothing, and still leave enough to put a little away for the future. Work itself was abundant. Factories lined the edges of cities, their smokestacks rising like sentinels over neighborhoods of small homes. One father walked into 3 different factories in a single afternoon in 1959, filled out 3 applications, and by the next morning had 3 offers waiting. He chose the one that paid him to learn his trade and stayed for 38 years. This was not unusual. Jobs were not scarce. Apprenticeships were paid positions. A young man could walk in with no experience, no high school diploma, and walk out with the promise of a future. Training was provided. Pensions were guaranteed. The companies invested in their workers because the workers, in turn, invested their lives. At midday, the factory whistle sounds. Men pour out into the yard, carrying metal lunchboxes packed that morning by their wives. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, thermoses of soup or coffee, an apple, perhaps a homemade cookie. They sit on benches in the sun, eating and talking, their conversations drifting from hockey scores to weekend plans to the new car someone's brother just bought. There is camaraderie here, a sense of shared purpose. These men work side by side, year after year, building things that will last. The school day ends at 3:30, and children spill out into the streets like water released from a dam. There is no supervision, no organized activities, no parents waiting with scheduled playdates. The afternoon belongs to them. A child can leave the house, walk 2 streets over, and join a road hockey game within minutes. Players they've never met, names they'll never learn. It doesn't matter. The game matters. Wooden sticks crack against pavement, a rubber puck skids across asphalt, and someone's little brother stands in net with a baseball glove. Other children disappear into ravines and vacant lots, building forts from scrap wood and cardboard, exploring the edges of their world without fear. Girls skip rope on sidewalks, the rhythmic slap of the rope, and the sing-song chants carrying down the block. Bicycles lean against fences, unlocked. No one steals them. Or if they do, it's rare enough to be shocking, an event the whole neighborhood talks about for weeks. One woman remembered knowing 7 phone numbers by heart, her grandmother's, 2 aunts, 4 friends. No directory needed. The numbers lived in her mind like prayers. If you needed to reach someone, you walked to their house, or you called from the phone in the hallway, the one with the rotary dial and the long cord that stretched just far enough to let you sit on the bottom stair for privacy. Phone conversations were brief. Long distance was expensive. You said what you needed to say, and then you hung up. Mothers, meanwhile, are home. They move through the hours with their own rhythms. Laundry hung on lines in the backyard, sheets snapping in the breeze, vegetables chopped for dinner, floors swept, windows open to let fresh air circulate through the house. Some gather for coffee in a neighbor's kitchen, talking over cups of instant Maxwell House, sharing recipes and stories while keeping one eye on the clock. Dinner must be ready by 6. As the sun begins to dip, fathers return home from work. Car doors slam in driveways, men loosen their ties, hang up their jackets, and settle into armchairs with the evening newspaper. The house smells of dinner cooking, roast beef, mashed potatoes, carrots boiled soft. The family gathers around the table at the same time every evening. There are no phones at the table, no screens, no distractions. Just the sound of forks on plates, the murmur of conversation, the occasional correction when a child forgets to say please or thank you. After dinner, the dishes are washed by hand, dried with cotton towels, and put away in cupboards. The mother wipes down the counters, wrings out the dishcloth, drapes it over the faucet to dry. The kitchen light is turned off. The family moves to the living room, where the television set waits like a glowing hearth. Saturday night means hockey night in Canada. Families gather on couches and floors, watching the Maple Leafs or the Canadiens battle it out on black and white screens. Foster Hewitt's voice fills the room, familiar and comforting. The game is more than entertainment. It is ritual. It is identity. It is the thread that ties this country together from coast to coast. On weeknights, children might catch the Friendly Giant on CBC before dinner or listen to their parents' radio programs in the evening. The voices from the CBC felt like extended family, steady and reliable, part of the fabric of daily life. One viewer recalled the corner store ledger, a simple notebook where the owner wrote down what you took, what you owed. Friday evening, when fathers got paid, the bill was settled. The system ran on nothing but trust. These small exchanges, these daily interactions, built something larger than commerce. They built community. On Saturdays, families made their way to Eaton's or Simpson Sears, the department stores that anchored downtown streets in cities across the country. For those in smaller towns, the Eaton's catalog arrived by mail like a wish book of possibility. Thick pages filled with clothing, furniture, toys, everything a family might need. Orders were placed, and weeks later, packages arrived at the local post office, waiting to be picked up. It was shopping by faith, by imagination, by trust that what you ordered would arrive as promised. Later in the day, something remarkable would happen, something that would define not just a year, but an entire generation's sense of possibility. In 1967, Canada turned 100 years old. The entire nation seemed to pause and take stock of itself. Expo 67 opened in Montreal that spring, a glittering vision of the future set on man-made islands in the St. Lawrence River. Pavilions rose like sculptures, each one a statement of progress and possibility. Geodesic domes, soaring pyramids, buildings that looked like they'd been borrowed from a world not yet invented. Over 50 million people visited that summer, wandering through exhibits that promised a tomorrow of space travel and technological marvels, of nations united in peace, of problems solved by human ingenuity. One man, 10 years old in 1967, would later recall the fireworks over Montreal's Citadel Hill, the first fireworks he'd ever seen, the night the sky itself seemed to celebrate what Canada was becoming. For 6 months, Expo 67 held up a mirror to the nation, and in that mirror, Canadians saw themselves as they wanted to be: modern, optimistic, forward-looking. The future was not something to fear. It was something to race toward with open arms. But even then, beneath the surface, the world was shifting. The certainties that had held the decade together were beginning to crack. Immigration patterns were changing. The economy was starting its long, slow transformation. The social contracts that had guaranteed jobs and pensions and affordable homes were being quietly rewritten by forces most people couldn't name and didn't see coming. For now, though, in 1967, none of that mattered. The centennial year felt like a peak, a moment when everything aligned, when the past seemed honorable and the future seemed bright. As night falls across Canadian towns and cities, lights blink on in windows, families settle into their evening routines, children are sent to bed at reasonable hours, their protests gentle and short-lived. Parents sit together in living rooms, reading or knitting or simply talking in low voices while the television murmurs in the background. Outside, the streets are quiet. A dog barks once, then falls silent. A car passes, its headlights sweeping across darkened lawns. Doors are not locked. This detail, repeated so often by those who lived through it, seems almost unbelievable now, but it was true. Front doors remained unlocked through the night. Back doors stood open in summer, screened but not latched. The idea that someone might enter uninvited, that harm might come from a stranger, was so remote as to be almost unthinkable. Trust was the default setting. Safety was assumed. What we see when we look back at daily life in 1960s Canada is not perfection. There were struggles, injustices, inequalities that would take decades to even begin addressing. But there was also something else, a kind of ease, a sense of security that extended beyond economics into the realm of the social. People knew their neighbors. They trusted their institutions. They believed without irony or doubt that their children would inherit a better world than the one they themselves had known. And perhaps that was the greatest difference. Not the unlocked doors or the milkman or the single-income households, but the belief itself. The unshakable conviction that the future was something to look forward to. That progress was real, that the arc of history bent toward something better. Somewhere between then and now, that belief slipped away so quietly that most people didn't notice it was gone until they reached for it and found only empty air. The Canada of the 1960s exists now only in memory, in fading photographs, in the stories told by those who were there. It cannot be brought back. Too much has changed. The world has moved on. But perhaps there is value in remembering, not with bitterness or regret, but with clear eyes, to see what was, to understand what has been lost, and to ask ourselves what, if anything, we might still choose to keep. The world has changed, but the memories remain. In remembering, a small piece of that world still lives within us, in the stories we tell, in the lessons we pass down, in the quiet moments when we pause and wonder what was gained and what was left behind. If you want to see more stories like this, subscribe to the channel.